This program is brought to you by PageFlakes. Until now, you had to go to different websites to do a search, get news and weather, check your email and your blogs, or listen to your favorite talk show. With PageFlakes, everything you need is on one page, and you can share it with your friends. It's all free. Get it together at pageflakes.com/talkshoe. That's page, FLAKES.com/talkshoe. Come over now and get it together.
Podcast Answer Man number 15. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Podcast Answer Man. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and this is a podcast production of the Generally Speaking Podcast Network. You can find this and all of our other podcasts over at gspn.tv. Anyway, it's good to be back in the studio here, coming off of a very long weekend, week coming up to a weekend, actually. It is now Friday. I have completely forgotten what day it is. As I have just come back from a very long vacation period. For the last 3 weeks, I have spent 2 of the 3 on vacation, which is really weird. Or maybe it's been longer than that. Anyway, I just got back from vacation, took the family to Myrtle Beach for a couple days, and had a very good time down there. And now just glad to be back in the studio, looking at my mixer, my monitors, and microphone, and streaming live out there at ustream.tv, and just chatting with some folks here in the chat room over at talkshoe.com, doing a live interactive show in all ways possible. So anyway, now that I'm back, I have a very small audience out there, but I just want to let you know today's podcast Answer Man show is not particularly going to be focused on any one thing right now. This is just a general show, general topics relating to podcasting. And the first thing I'm going to do is start off with an email that I received from, let's see here, Chris V. And Chris V is from Sports Media Incorporated, and he had some questions regarding a podcast that he's starting up. Let's see here. I'll just go through here and go straight to the question. He says, the 2 main questions that I have and I need help with are these. First, what is the best service to use to host my podcast? He says, I've currently signed up with GoDaddy service, and that seems to be very limited in what it can do. Let's see here. It shows me how many downloads have been done for all of my files, but I don't have the ability to see how many subscribers to my channel, etc. And then the second question that he has is, I have my podcast in iTunes, but I don't know how to add the photo that shows up in iTunes as my channel photo. Is there an easy way to do that? All right, so here are the answers to Chris's questions, and these are very common questions asked in the area of podcasting. I think that you really could answer both of these questions with one service. Actually, no. One service will answer a portion of the first question and will certainly fix the second question. The first question had 2 things. What's the best host? And he said also, I'm limited in my stats reporting over there at GoDaddy. And so here's what I'm going to suggest for you as an answer, and that is to use a service called FeedBurner. Now, FeedBurner is an excellent source for podcasting. It is basically what it does is it takes your RSS feed from, let's say you're using WordPress or Blogger or whatever it is that you're using to generate your RSS feed. Instead of taking that RSS feed and just putting it out there for people to subscribe to or to submit that to iTunes, that what you should do is kind of dress it up a little. In fact, for it to work correctly in iTunes, you do need to dress it up quite a bit. You'll have to add some iTunes-friendly tags, including tags inside that coding of the RSS file or the XML file. You'll need to include some special language on there as far as where your podcast image is. These things are not a part of the standard coding for RSS feeds in a WordPress blog or any of the other blogging engines out there. Now, many blogging engines include or have not include, but have available to them plugins. These are special add-ons that you can install into your software that will kind of dress these things up for you. I prefer, however, to use a service called FeedBurner. FeedBurner has recently been purchased by Google, and I really am a fan of Google, although they do seem to be taking over the world, and they do track a whole lot of information about you personally when you're doing searches. I'm not too sure about that. But anyway, I am a huge fan of Google and the services that they do offer, and I was very glad to hear that if FeedBurner was going to be purchased, that it would be Google that purchased them, because I rely on that RSS feed that I use from FeedBurner for my subscription base. So if for example, if FeedBurner ever went out of business, all the folks who are subscribed to my podcasts would no longer be subscribed to my podcast because they're using that feed. And so in essence, what I do, I use a WordPress blogging software. And I take just the standard RSS feed and I go over to feedburner.com, and there's a little box in there, like an address box, and I paste in the feed address, the XML address for my feed from WordPress into that FeedBurner front page. And then over to the right, there's usually a little box that you can click that says I'm a podcaster. And then there is a button that says burn this feed, or submit this feed for FeedBurner, or whatever it is. Right currently it says burn this feed, but just in case it ever changes, the gist of this is going to be the same. What you'll do is you'll walk through a couple step process of naming your feed, giving it a name, such as this one's the Podcast Answer Man. You'll actually choose the URL of your feed by giving it a username or a specific name for your feed. For example, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the address for the FeedBurner feed for this podcast from WordPress is like GSPN or http://gspn.tv/ I can't remember how I do that. Is it shows or category? I think it's category / PAM for Podcast Answer Man / feed. And that's the actual WordPress feed. But instead, what I've done is I've burned that, and I chose PAM, I believe, for the Podcast Answer Man. So my feed that you should be subscribed to, if you used the subscribe links on my podcast page over at gspn.tv, then you would have been told to subscribe to http://feeds.feedburner.com/PAM. And so basically, whatever you choose, let's just say you have the Apple Jelly podcast, and you do a podcast all about making apple jelly. Your FeedBurner feed could be feeds.feedburner.com/applejelly, or Apple Jelly Podcast, or AJP for Apple Jelly Podcast. Whatever you want, you choose what it is. And then it's very simple to walk right through those steps. I mean, it's going to ask you very basic questions, and just go through and answer those. And it's going to ask you to choose a category. And I don't think in the initial setup it asks you for your image. However, once you get set up and it says, okay, you're ready to go, you'll be taken to the kind of customization page for your feed at FeedBurner. And once you're there, there's a little tab that says SmartCast. And so you want to go ahead and click on, or actually no, it's customize. You click on the customize tab. And before I tell you all this, I'm doing all this from memory and it's been so long. I'm going to go ahead and go to feedburner.com real quick. And I'm going to click on my feed since I'm consistently logged in there. So I am going to say my feeds. And I'm going to be able to look at this and tell you exactly how it works. Podcast Answer Man. So I am clicking on Podcast Answer Man. Optimize. So once you're in the configuration window, before I go there, the very first tab is Analyze. And this is going to answer that second part of your first question. There is some statistics that are out there that they'll track for you at FeedBurner. Personally, I don't pay for the extra Super Stats Pro or whatever they call them, FeedBurner Stats Pro program. I think they do a pretty decent job of telling you how many subscribers you have, and they'll break it down to how many are using iTunes, how many are using some other service to basically download your podcast, how many are doing it through websites. I personally don't even use FeedBurner Stats whatsoever. I use another service, Stats, and I'll talk about that when I answer the other part of hosting. However, basically, let's go to the second tab on FeedBurner, and it's called Optimize. And then if you go down on the left-hand side, there's a menu about halfway down the page, or just before halfway down the page, you see a thing that says SmartCast. Click on that SmartCast tab to the left, and then about 4 questions down it says podcast image location. Basically, you're not going to be able to upload your image to FeedBurner. Instead, you need to upload your image to the web somewhere that's accessible to anybody on the web. You can use file sharing sites as long as they allow linking outside of that service for this to work. And so basically what you want to do is once you get it up there, find out what the address of your image, it should be, let's see here. It should be a 300 by 300 image, preferably a JPEG or a PNG file. One of the things that I found is important is to make sure that your extension of .jpg or PNG, make sure that it's in lowercase when you upload it to the web, because sometimes the preview doesn't work quite right in some of the directories out there. And so once you have that, that's how you get that image in there. When you're done with all of the customization and under the Optimize and the SmartCast section, then your feed has been burned by FeedBurner. And it's a really nice service. What you can do at that point is to take your brand new feed at like feeds.feedburner.com/applejellypodcast, and you go over to iTunes or all the other directories out there, and you just paste that into the feed. Now, Chris, you said that you had already submitted your podcast with the original feed without it being dressed up over to iTunes. That's real simple to fix. All you need to do is go out to, well, it depends. If you have subscribers, you probably want to leave it up for a while, announce people to other folks that you have a new feed that you'd like them to subscribe to. It'll take you a couple days to get it submitted and approved through iTunes. But once you do that, it should be no problem at all to get that switched over. And I would just make an announcement to folks that you have set up a new feed and put a link to that on the main page of your website and ask them to subscribe to that. And then about a week later, you would want to go ahead and submit a report a concern ticket over at iTunes and have them... I'm sorry, my daughter just came into the studio. Yes, Megan?
May I please have 3 suckers?
Did Mommy ask you if you could come in and get those?
No.
Then no, you may not get them right now. Okay?
Can I come down if she says?
If she says it's okay, that'd be fine. Sorry about that. One of the things I believe in as a podcaster is live and unscripted for most of the shows, unless it's a professional done podcast. And this one definitely is not a professional podcast. This is just, hey, a guy is trying to help you out with answering some podcast questions. Anyway, back to where I was. go to the iTunes Music Store, search for that podcast feed of the one you want to get rid of, click on Report a Concern, and then in the drop-down box, it'll ask you, why are you reporting a concern? And one of them is, please delete podcast. And you would pull in this little bubble or box in there. You just type in that you're the author of the podcast and you've accidentally submitted the wrong feed and you've created a new feed, and they'll delete that within the next day or so. So that works out pretty good. And that really, if you have any other questions, feel free to call them in at the GSPN listener line at area code 859-795-4067. Again, that's 859-795-4067. Anyway, I'm going to go in the chat room before I answer the hosting question, and I noticed that Rachel had posed a couple thoughts in here in the chat room. So she says, when you have a chance, I have some questions. And she says, how does FeedBurner work with TalkShoe? Is it possible to switch your feed from TalkShoe to FeedBurner seamlessly, or would people have to resubscribe? Okay, first of all, TalkShoe uses its own feeds, and you really don't need to burn the FeedBurner, you don't need to use FeedBurner to burn your feed from TalkShoe because they already have it customized for iTunes. So if you're a TalkShoe only hosted podcast and you don't have your own website and your own RSS feed outside of TalkShoe, then the TalkShoe feed, whatever image you upload for your profile for your show that is associated with that RSS feed, that image will be put into the channel page, and everything's is whatever category you chose. They'll port that over to the category in iTunes, so everything should work seamlessly. You really don't need to do FeedBurner on it unless you wanted to do stats. The only problem is that TalkShoe currently does not allow any customization of your TalkCast page. So that means that now there's talk of whether or not they may allow you to do this in the future, and possibly at maybe for a Podcaster Pro package or something like that, for an additional fee monthly, I think is what I've heard, whispered around some corners over at TalkShoe. Talked to a couple birdies, but I won't mention any names. But a little bluebird has been sitting on my shoulder over here. But anyway, I will tell you that I see in the future the ability to do some customization of your podcast feeds, or even replace the TalkShoe feed on your TalkCast page with your own feed sometime in the future. And with that, you could very well burn your feed through FeedBurner, which would allow you to track some stats. And basically, you would be able to change it to where when people hit the subscribe button on your TalkCast page over at TalkShoe, it would certainly subscribe them to the FeedBurner feed instead. And then with the other question that you asked, what would people have to subscribe to a new feed? Yes, they would. There is a way that you could work around this, and it's by taking, you could do what we call a redirect and set that podcast feed web address to redirect to your new feed. Things start to get a little hairy at that point because, number one, since the originator of the original feed is TalkShoe and it's on the TalkShoe server, they would be the ones that would have to actually set up that redirect. I don't know that they're interested in doing that. Number two, it's always best, instead of redirecting people all over the place, I think to just have people subscribe to the correct feed that you prefer them to correct or to subscribe to. For example, I generally ask folks not to subscribe to the feed over at TalkShoe.com. And the folks in the chat room right now over at TalkShoe, they're actually hearing the recording broadcast or message over at TalkShoe because I just realized that I never started the recording on the TalkShoe end. But don't worry. I record everything locally here in the studio, so haven't lost anything. In fact, for those of you who have recently joined in here, if you have some podcasting questions, I really really would love it if you call in and ask some questions, share some comments, some insights regarding podcasting. I'd love to just chat with you folks for a little bit. But anyway, basically she said that Rachel was asking this because she was mainly concerned about the stats. If you are able to do that in the future, Rachel, then what I would do is certainly burn that feed and then put the new feed on the TalkShoe page. And I would ask your subscribers to please go and subscribe to the new feed and give them plenty of notice before you make that official switch over. But from the very beginning, I've always had my own feed, and I take some extra steps just for the sake of asking people not to subscribe to the feeds that are posted over at TalkShoe. For example, like right now, if you're hearing this message and you have subscribed to our feed using any of the links found at TalkShoe.com, please unsubscribe from the Podcast Answer Man in your directory or your podcatcher, and go over to gspn.tv and subscribe to any of our shows using those feeds. Those are the preferred feeds. And yes, I will get more accurate statistics. I'll get better everything, not to mention the fact that you'll get shows that you're not going to get on the TalkShoe feed. For example, I record a lot of podcasts without ever recording a live show here in TalkShoe. And therefore, what happens in that case, if let's just say you were on my TalkCast page for the Podcast Answer Man over here at TalkShoe.com, and you hit subscribe. Well, every time I upload a new show to TalkShoe, you'll get a copy of that. But chances are I may record something in the studio only. And once I make that available, if I don't post that to TalkShoe and instead I put that over at another host, then what that means is that the folks over at TalkShoe, the ones that have subscribed to that feed, are not going to get all of the content that I produce for that particular podcast. And so that is why I am very anxious to have the ability to either strip out all the subscribe links from the TalkShoe page or to at the very least replace them with my own links. And I'd be more than happy to sign up for some kind of pro package where, for maybe $10 a month or something like that, where I have the ability to customize my TalkCast page. Anyway, Chris, you had one other question. What do I do about file hosting? And this is, again, where stats come into play. File hosting, one of the places you could host your file is a place that we've talked a whole lot about, and that's at TalkShoe.com. TalkShoe does give you some pretty basic stats, and I will tell you that they're nothing like what I would be interested in. But, at the very least, they are some stats that can tell you week by week how many podcasts have been downloaded and by episode, and they have some degree of detail to them. But I will tell you, the nice thing about TalkShoe is if you host over there, they pay you for content. They pay you for downloads, which is very nice. But if you're really the payoff or the trade-off there is that you give them the ability to place a little advertising, maybe at the front or the end or both of your podcast, such as, hey, this podcast is being sponsored by GoDaddy.com. Go to GoDaddy.com and enter the TalkCast ID or the promo ID TalkShoe for 10% off or something like that. And so just a 15-second spot might run in front of your show, and at the very end, it might sing really funny, this has been a podcast production of TalkShoe or what have you. Anyway, if you don't mind that and you want to make a little extra money, it's kind of nice. It's basically you have nothing to lose unless you just don't want any kind of commercial in your podcast at all. And in that case, there is, in my mind, no better place to go to for file hosting other than Libsyn.com. That's Libsyn.com. You can also get there by going to Libsyn.org. And Libsyn stands for Liberated Syndication. And they were one of the very early players in podcast bandwidth solutions. and their service is phenomenal. You'll never get better stats at reporting on downloads than you'll get from Libsyn. They are just simply amazing. It is a company built for podcasters, hands down. Unlimited bandwidth. You could have 180,000 downloads of every single show you put out, and put out a show every day, and you don't have to worry about bandwidth issues whatsoever. And what you do is you pay for server space. So now server space on their high-speed server for a 30-day given period of time. And what that means is that for example, I think I might have like 1 gig of space for 30 days, and I have something like a $30 plan. They have like a $10 plan, a $20 plan, a $30, a $50. They might even have a $60. But anyway, it's ridiculous. You can put video out there. You can put any kind of file up there that you want to syndicate out in your feed. And it is LIB as in boy, SYN.com. Liberated Syndication. LIBSYN.com. And the reason I'm spelling that is there's some folks in the chat room over here at TalkShoe that are asking. And so why don't I go ahead and type that in for them as well. So anyway, Libsyn.com is the best place out there, most affordable for unlimited bandwidth without any strings attached. We'll throw advertisements in front of it. In fact, you can work it out and put advertisements in your show, and you have full control over that and sell your own advertising. And it's just really nice. But anyway, if you're using, and of course, they also have a blog engine associated with it. If you don't know anything about podcasting whatsoever, you could use just Libsyn if you read through all their how-tos and stuff, which is not too complicated. You can just use Libsyn. I mean, it'll have its own podcast. It'll create a podcast page for you. It'll create a feed that's optimized for iTunes already, so you don't have to do FeedBurner. You can just use your Libsyn feed, and I believe they may even have a button where you could submit it to iTunes from them. I'm not sure if you have to do that manually or not anymore. But anyway, Libsyn is a great service. Absolutely one of the best. Now, I have a couple people still in the chat room. I'm going to ask you guys if you have any other questions. And while I wait to see if you guys type something in, I'm going to check my email because I try to keep some questions in the Gmail section for podcast content. All right, so here it is. This is the other question. Let's see here. Scroll down. Okay. Eric Fisher from, I can't remember, is it Marion, Indiana? Anyway, Eric Fisher is a great friend of mine, and he once was out there, and I saw him post a tweet. And his tweet said something like, can anybody tell me how to handle negative feedback or negative comments on iTunes, or even in email? How do you deal, as a podcaster, how do you deal with negative feedback? Now, I'm going to, if you don't mind, and again, if anybody out there has questions, you can call in or you can post them in the chat room here. I am going to give you an example of negative feedback. And of course, I have no problems finding any negative feedback on my shows because I get quite a bit of it. When you're an opinionated person and you're outspoken, chances are you'll eventually offend someone. And I am no stranger to offending folks. And I don't do it on purpose. I promise. But I just tend to do that, I guess, sometimes. Anyway, I am going to go to my gspn.tv all-inclusive iTunes page, which is what I'm looking at right now. And I'm clicking to see all my reviews. There are only 4 reviews for the all-inclusive feed. It's because I don't advertise it very often. But I want to read to you the 4th one on here from a guy who calls himself Jerry Franklin. And just to give you an idea of how negative feedback might sound, here is what Jerry has to say about the all-inclusive feed of the Generally Speaking Podcast Network. He says, and I quote, "There is just too much. These two people are online constantly and feel the need to podcast just about every moment of everything they do. This makes for a disappointing group. For a disappointing group of way too many podcasts with TMI, too much information. I really feel bad for their children who seem neglected as their parents are always on the computer, and when their children come into the room, they often shoo them away. Now, as if we don't have enough, Cliff decides to podcast his huffing and puffing walk to work. In addition to feeling bad for their kids, I feel bad for Cliff's employer. Too much and quite nauseating." So there you go. That is just an example of some negative feedback. And I want to tell you, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most negative feedback, that's probably that's a level 2 or 3. There has been some out there that are just short of what I would consider death threats. And just downright mean, evil, nasty things. And the truth is how do you handle this? Well, first of all, if you're a human being, chances are you'll be defensive. And then you'll get angry. And you'll be filled with rage. And then you might even get like distraught or depressed over something they've said, or you might get your feelings hurt. All of these reactions are normal. The fact is if somebody is attacking the way you do something that you put your heart and soul into, then chances are anything they say that, Kim, I'm going to bring you on in just a moment. But anyway, I can't. I'm laughing now. I'll ask Kim to explain why I'm laughing in just a moment. But anyway, I forget. Let's just bring Kim on because I just lost my all train of thought here. So let's see if we can get this phone to work. Kim, are you there? Kim, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Kim, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. So, Kim, how do you handle negative feedback?
Well, we haven't had any negative feedback yet, but we talked about this before we started our Girls Night In podcast about what we would do and how we would handle our negative feedback. And it was one of the things that we just said, negative feedback is going to happen. We don't know when, we don't know how much, and we don't know how bad it's going to be. But we decided that we're just going to take it for what it is. People are going to write in, they're going to complain, they may call in, they may complain. If there's constructive criticism that we can find within that feedback, then we'll take that for what it is. We'll try and find the constructive criticism, but if it's just plain criticism or being rude and nasty, then something that we need to realize is that the rude and nasty comes from within those people. It doesn't come from us. So it's kind of just putting that negative back onto them because the negative isn't us. It is coming from them.
Right, absolutely. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to explain what I was laughing about because
I will not explain.
You're not going to explain?
No.
All right, folks. I'll go ahead and just say a couple things, and if you're interested in finding out what I think is so funny, is when I was talking about TMI or too much information. Kim wrote in the chat room. She said, "Just ask Bob." And as far as people might complain about Cliff sharing too much information, I invite you to listen to the very first episode of the Girls Night In podcast at girlsnightinpodcast.com. And that is a perfect example of too much information. I will tell you.
We're a bunch of girls that get together and, we just kind of talk freely and things happen to be said and, well, you can't take them back unless you go in and re-edit and re-upload. And, well, I'm just not into putting out that much energy.
So
TMI is out there. You guys want to know, go listen.
There you go. And so I'm sure folks will go and check that out just to find out more about Bob. And that's enough said. Moving right along. All right. So I think, Kim, you answered. You brought in some very important information there. Is first of all, not all criticism is negative. Some folks out there will write in, and trust me, I have a lot of feedback. I think on my Weekly Lost podcast, there's almost 200, maybe over 200 reviews on iTunes. I probably get about 40 emails from people giving me feedback on episodes, ranging from, Cliff, keep up the great job. It's the most encouraging thing. I hope you never quit podcasting, to, Cliff, you're the scum of the earth. I can't believe that you do what you do, and you make me sick and want to throw up. And then swallow it, and that'd be more enjoyable than listening to you. And so, I mean, there's a little bit of a range there that I get. So anyway, what do? One of the things is that I really enjoy hearing from folks who start off their emails with, "Hey, Cliff, I want to let you know I've been listening to you for a couple weeks or a couple months or even from the beginning. One of the things that I've noticed is that and they could bring up something that might annoy them or something that kind of rubs them the wrong way in the podcast. For example, you say the word actually 500 billion times. Nobody's actually said that to me, and I wonder why, because I always say actually. But anyway, you say this all the time. I don't know if you're quite aware of it, but I just want to let you know. I mean, I'm still going to listen to you if you don't stop saying it, but if you could kind of watch for it, it would be kind of cool if that was something that could be worked out. And so there is criticism like that, and that is not negative feedback. Now, there is what some people consider constructive criticism that comes off in a very negative way. I will tell you that, just as a general rule of thumb, and using email for many years now, not everything that you perceive to be negative was written in a negative tone. And that's one of the faults and problems of written communication. There's no body language. There's no way to really read the emphasis on words that are placed in a certain way, and there's no emotion in the words, and so they're just flat. And really, you can, whatever your frame of mind is basically how you might take it. And if you come off being one with somewhat of a prohibitive conscience, where you think people are always constantly criticizing you, then you might come off and read something that's very constructive and was well thought out, and you might feel that it was extremely negative. You kind of have to take the good with the bad and just kind of let things go. If something really bothers you, I will tell you, refrain from hitting the reply key if it comes in the form of email. Refrain from immediately responding to that. Give it some time to kind of wear off the initial reaction. Perhaps go back and read it again and see if it's possible that it might not be as negative as what you have come to think, or at least even if it is, and if you feel like you might want to respond to it, kind of take a breath before you do and take some time to cool down. However, one of the things that I like to do is, if somebody's extremely negative, trust me, I have some extremely negative feedback. If there's somebody that is just really, I love the ones who take, probably about 20 to 30 minutes of their time just ranting and raving with 13 or 14 paragraphs of things, and they're just really just calling you names and just saying some really awful, nasty things. I love to do nothing more than to stop probably about 2 paragraphs in and hit the delete key and refuse to ever give that person the pleasure of knowing that I even bothered to read that far into the email, because that person obviously has something going on. And personally, I try to take the high road and say, hey, I don't know what this guy's issue is or this girl's issue is, But, I mean, obviously they've said some very mean and nasty things towards me and my family or what have you. And, you know, sometimes I find that I'm most critical of others when I see things that I don't like, and I find out that those are really the reason why I don't like it is because I hate the fact that I see that in myself. Kind of, you know, I realize that sometimes some folks may be, you know, just really pointing out a flaw in me. For example, with this negative feedback, it says Cliff and Stephanie consistently neglect their kids. The fact is that, you know, he's talking about the fact that sometimes during our weekly Lost podcast over the last, you know, 2 years almost, our kids have come into the studio from time to time, but it's been way past their bedtime. We always had waited until after the kids were in bed to do our podcasting. And it, you know, if we shooed them out, it was because they were up past their bedtime. I mean, there was always good reason for shooing them away. And it's not like, I mean, now folks may look and say, hey, Cliff, that's all he does is sit in front of a computer, but that is just not the case. But one of the things I do for a hobby, and I really don't experience, I mean, technology is my hobby. So when I'm spending free time, I spend my time podcasting. That's something I love to do. And it would be no different than, you know, my friend who likes to golf a lot and goes golfing all the time, or, you know, whatever it is people out there like to do, their hobbies. So, but the thing is what I realize is that somebody who writes in and says, I feel sorry for their kids, or I feel sorry for their employer, it indicates to me that perhaps this person may have an issue of neglecting their own kids. And they kind of just assume that that's what Cliff and Stephanie are doing because they kind of see some kind of thing that gives an indication or a hint that that might be what's happening. Now, I'm not going to ever say that there haven't been times where I've been selfish with my time, and instead of hanging out with my wife or my kids, that I've said selfishly, hey, I just want some time to myself and I want to go do my thing. Of course I've been there. I've done that with podcasting. I've done that with all the other things that are in my life. And you know, I consistently have to come back and realign my priorities. And that, you know, that's one of the things about growing as an individual. But to sit there and take and write a comment such as that in such a place that's a permanent review on iTunes, you know, it's just kind of a little much. You know, those things are better handled face to face. And if this person really felt sorry for my kids, they probably, you know, Jerry, you maybe you can give me a call and leave me a message at area code 859-795-4067 and let's sit down and have a heart-to-heart and talk about it and perhaps share some of your concerns. And I'd be happy to talk with you. But anyway, how do I handle feedback? It's a case-by-case basis, Eric, and I'm sure that, you know, you and I have talked, and, you know, you kind of just have to understand that when you're broadcasting or podcasting out to hundreds or even thousands of people, not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to like what you have to say, how you say it, what you choose to say. I mean, and some folks are just literally going to be very vocal about that. The only thing that I really don't like about the human nature is that we are so gung-ho to criticize people, and we'll go way out of our way to criticize people, but not very often do we take the time to praise others for what they do. And one of the things I'm very thankful for is all the folks who have written in and said, hey, Cliff, I love your podcast, or leave a voicemail on the listener line at 859-795-4067. And say, hey, Cliff, this isn't really to be played into the podcast. I just want to let you know I'm really glad you're still podcasting. You know, just a short little thing like that really does help when these negative feedbacks continually roll in. It's just nice to know that folks out there are really listening and they're really enjoying what you're doing. So with that, I think that answers all the questions that I have in my bin here. I have nothing else queued up for the podcast Answer Man. And I will tell you that if you guys might be interested in knowing that Stephanie and I were talking on vacation, and we decided that, this whole putting things off to just doing podcasts here and there whenever we get a chance and giving people anywhere between a 15 to 20 minute notice isn't probably the best thing to do all summer long. So just a note, we are considering, this isn't anything that is definite, but we are considering the possibility of, and I'm trying to pull something up here while I'm talking, of doing a couple marathon podcasts, maybe even regularly scheduled, instead of doing like a couple shows on a couple nights a week, but maybe possibly setting something like a Sunday evening aside and recording 2 or 3 podcasts every Sunday night live on TalkShoe. So if that sounds awesome to you, just send me an email to cliff@gspn.tv and say, hey, I think that's a great idea. Or you can call in and leave questions about podcasting for future episodes of the Podcast Answer Man. I'd love to talk about podcasting more with you guys. And I prefer it if you have the opportunity to go ahead and call in your questions to area code 859-795-4067. That is the gspn.tv listener line. Just tell us your name, where you're calling from, and that it's a question for the Podcast Answer Man show, and I will archive it and put it in the next show. So with that, I think that covers just about everything. So I'm going to head on out of here. God bless you all. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of the Podcast Answer Man.
This program is a production of the Generally Speaking Podcast Network. You'll find this and other podcasts on our website at gspn.tv. Thanks for listening.